In Five Nights at Freddy's 2, we follow Mike Schmidt and his younger sister Abby as they reconnect with the supposedly soulless animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, only to unleash the vengeful spirit of the marionette, possessed by murdered child Charlotte Emily, who begins possessing both new toy animatronics and humans alike, forcing Mike to confront buried secrets about police officer Vanessa's family connection to serial killer William Afton, while trying to save his sister from supernatural forces that span multiple locations and timelines. Sounds exciting, right? It should be. It also sounds fucking convoluted. This is one of 2025's most confounding theatrical experiences, a film so structurally broken, so narratively incoherent, and so fundamentally misguided that it makes you wonder if anyone involved understood basic storytelling principles. I saw this opening weekend at Regal's RPX Theater. The upcharge premium format with slightly larger screens, this isn't true 90-foot IMAX like the handful of real ones in NYC, but still a very solid theatrical experience. And honestly, the RPX splurge was worth it. I saw Hurry Up Tomorrow in RPX, and I also saw 28 Years Later in RPX, and those were both great crowds. The RPX splurge was worth it, but not for the reasons for this movie Universal hoped. This movie is hilariously bad, and seeing it on a huge screen with a packed Saturday night crowd wearing FNAF merchandise, clapping and cheering at every reference, transformed what would have been a tedious slog at home into genuine entertainment, just not the kind the filmmakers intended. Most movies move in a straight line, even unconventional ones. Art films, blockbusters, horror, they all have narrative through lines you can follow. FNAF 2 moves in a zigzag, constantly cutting between storylines without letting any of them develop tension or meaning. We cut from Abby trying to repair animatronics at the newer Freddy's location to paranormal investigators at the 1982 site getting killed, to Mike visiting Henry Emily about her daughter's murder, to Vanessa dealing with trauma, to Abby at school with her cartoonishly evil teacher, to the toy animatronics exploring town, back to Mike, then to Vanessa getting captured, then Abby's at the old location, then Mike's at the new location. None of these scenes flow into each other organically. They're just happening in sequence because the script says they should. There's no cause and effect, no building dread, no sense that we're heading somewhere specific. It's narrative chaos. Think about how Oppenheimer, a 3-hour biographical drama, keeps you engaged by constantly asking questions while answering smaller ones. Can they build the bomb? How will they solve the plutonium problem? What are the moral implications? Each scene raises stakes while resolving previous tensions, building toward the Trinity test and then the security hearing climax. Even Nolan's complex dialogue-heavy approach understands forward momentum. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 runs 104 minutes, barely an hour and 40 minutes. And it feels longer because it has no forward momentum whatsoever. It's not structured in acts. It's a collection of disconnected scenes duct taped together with lore exposition. Nothing builds, nothing escalates, we just sort of exist in various locations while characters explain things to each other until the movie stops. Horror has a rhythm. A commonly cited guideline is that something scary in a horror movie should happen roughly every 30 minutes to maintain tension. Not necessarily a kill, but something that reminds us we are watching horror. FNAF 2 violates this spectacularly, letting enormous stretches pass with nothing but characters walking around explaining plot points to each other. This feels depressingly familiar. Universal and Blumhouse have developed a pattern with their horror franchises where they prioritize IP exploitation over quality storytelling. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends both suffered from the exact same fundamental issues. They weren't interesting stories. They had no idea what they were about beyond more Michael Myers content. Both films meandered through incoherent plots while assuming the brand name alone justified their existence. Megan was similarly confused, trying to be a campy killer doll movie and a serious AI thriller simultaneously. Megan 2.0 doubled down on the convolution, though at least it attempted to engage with its themes more directly. It was still a fucking mess. The frustrating thing is that plenty of critically panned movies still work as entertainment. The Jurassic World trilogy has terrible Rotten Tomato scores, but understands how to deliver spectacle and pace action sequences. Venom movies are critically savage, but know exactly what kind of silly fun they're providing. Michael Bay's Transformers trilogy is corny as fuck, But for all their faults, they maintain visual coherence and momentum during all their action scenes, and it knows what kind of story it's telling. FNAF 2 doesn't even achieve that baseline competence. It's not fun bad like Troll 2 or fascinatingly broken like The Room. It's just boring and poorly constructed, which is somehow worse for a property about haunted animatronics that murder people at a pizza restaurant. The first film, for all its faults, understood the power of a single location. The claustrophobic security office created inherent tension. The sequel explodes outward to multiple locations. The 1982 pizzeria, the newer restaurant, Mike's house, Abby's school, various town locations during the toy animatronics rampage, and it gains absolutely nothing from it. More locations should mean more possibilities for scares and spectacle. Instead, they just dilute focus. Let's count the major storylines running simultaneously, because there is a fuck ton of subplots. First, there's Abby reconnecting with the animatronics and repairing them. Then there's Mike investigating Charlotte Emily's murder with her father, Henry. There's Vanessa processing trauma about her serial killer father. There's the paranormal investigation crew exploring the 1982 location. There's a storyline about Vanessa's secret brother, which is crowbarred in, who's secretly operating as a security guard planning to do something evil. There's the toy animatronics escaping and rampaging through town. There's the 2002 Faz Fest festival being held despite the murder folklore. There's Mr. Berg antagonizing Abby at school, which is just corny, and the guy isn't even developed. There's the original animatronics fading away as their souls move on, William Afton's corpse being discovered and reanimating. That's 10 major plot threads in a 104-minute movie. A typical well-structured film has maybe 3 to 4 subplots supporting the main story. This is narrative overload and chaos. The film never decides what it's actually about. It's about Abby's relationship with the animatronics, Mike uncovering the truth about the murders, Vanessa confronting her family legacy, the marionette seeking revenge. The issue is, even if you're dealing with all these subplots, none of them matter because all people really care about is Five Nights at Freddy's. We just care about the animatronics. And the movie can't even build a interesting storyline about that. When you have this really cool fucking creepy looking puppet like the marionette, utilize that. Utilize the animatronics. Freddy Fazbear is barely in this movie, and when they come out at the end, and everyone was cheering like this is an Avengers movie, it's definitely fun, but it's very obviously this flawed movie where the very thing you came to see is barely in it. And if we just compare this structurally to the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which had a simple through line, Mike takes a security job at a creepy pizzeria, discovers the animatronics are possessed by murdered children, including his missing brother, and must confront William Afton. It was still very cheesy, but it was more clean, straightforward, easy to follow. Not great cinema, but functional. And it had that kind of emotional core, where we knew that Mike lost his brother, who was killed, and, have the villain of the guy who killed his brother. It all kind of tied together in a way that was really corny. You can check out my review for that movie. I thought it was really stupid, but at least it wasn't as convoluted. And also, nobody in this movie feels remotely human. They are plot delivery mechanisms who exist to move between story beats and recite lore. Mike spends most of this movie reacting to things rather than driving action. His big moment is sitting at a computer, pressing giant picture book buttons labeled things like map tracker and disconnect signal, while Abby's in danger. At this point in my screening, people were all just talking and laughing, and usually I'd be like, all right guys, shut up, I'm trying to lock in, but honestly, I didn't care. This is the type of movie that doesn't even respect its audience. It's just ridiculous to watch this, being passed off as, horror or entertainment. It's stupid. And also just so absurdly simplistic. And at the end, he suddenly turns on Vanessa, who's been helping him the entire time because she didn't mention her evil brother. Dude, she told you about her serial killer father. Maybe prioritize your anger better. The film treats us like we have a 0 IQ. Everything is explained multiple times, motivations are stated aloud repeatedly, and yet somehow it's still confusing because the actual character logic makes no sense. Abby is supposedly fascinated by the animatronics because she realizes they lack souls, unlike the first film where they were possessed children. This could be interesting. A child trying to understand consciousness and what makes something alive is rich thematic territory. Instead, the film just has her fix them, help them escape. The movie never clarifies her motivations beyond she just likes them. Her possession by the marionette should be the film's emotional climax, but the line, "Don't you know the first rule of hide and seek is to check behind the door," delivered while she's puppeted, is so on the nose and forced that it becomes unintentionally comedic. The film establishes the rule earlier just so we could call back to it, but that's not how meaningful callbacks work. They have to feel natural, not like checking boxes on a reference list. Vanessa suffers from PTSD related to her father's murders, which could provide real dramatic weight. Instead, she just stands around looking worried and occasionally warning people. Her capture by Charlotte and subsequent rescue pass by with minimal impact. Then she gets possessed by the marionette at the very end in the most blatant sequel bait moment imaginable. She literally pledges her loyalty to Mike throughout the film, helping him at every turn, and then he freaks out at her at the ending for not mentioning her brother earlier. Dude, we didn't even know. It's the most awful twist. This guy's in one scene with the McKenna Grace characters. He's such an obvious creep, disappears the whole movie, and then just comes back to be the twist brother. Like, bro, he was in one scene. None of this should make sense. The character turning point is so jarring and unearned that audiences were laughing in my theater when he was like, "Don't talk to me," like that rally meme. Don't come by my house. Also, Wayne Knight's Mr. Berg was one of the worst offenders. He's introduced as Abby's teacher who breaks her science project out of pure dickishness. No nuance, no complexity, just a cartoon villain. And then when Toy Chica says she wants to have a talk with him and get inside his head, we know it's coming. The film even repeats the inside your head joke like 3 separate times, as if repetition makes it clever. It doesn't. It makes it feel like the script was written by someone who just learned what a callback is. The marionette also should be this film's signature villain, a genuinely creepy, puppet-like entity possessed by Charlotte Emily's vengeful spirit. Visually, it delivers. The design is unsettling, the movement's uncanny, but the film has no idea how to use it effectively. Its powers seem to change based on plot convenience. It can possess people, Lisa from the investigation crew, Abby and Vanessa. It can remotely control animatronics across miles of distance somehow. It kills some possessed victims like McKenna Grace, but not others like Abby, and a music box can put it to sleep, but only when the plot needs this to work. The rules are inconsistent, which destroys any sense of threat. In good horror, understanding the monster's capabilities creates tension. You know what it can do, so you fear when it will do it. Here, the marionette just does whatever the script requires in any given moment. The possession scenes could be horrifying. Imagine the slow creep of losing control, the body horror of something invading your mind. Instead, possessed characters just get glowing eyes and act obviously evil. There's no subtlety and no building dread. What bothers me most is how the marionette becomes just another narrative device rather than a genuine threat. It exists to move plot forward, possessing whoever needs to be possessed when the script calls for it, rather than operating as a character with consistent motivation and behavior. When the toy animatronics escape and rampage through town, this should be the film's centerpiece. Imagine the chaos of murderous robots loose in the populated area, the panic, the body count. Instead, we get a few scattered scenes of them walking around and one kill, Mr. Berg, which happens off-screen. And the geography makes no sense. How close are these locations to each other? Abby bikes to the 1982 pizzeria like it's down the street. Mike drives around finding everything instantly. The animatronics apparently haul ass across miles of terrain while remaining completely silent when the plot needs them to be, then suddenly appear loudly when a scene requires it. When withered Bonnie busts through a vent and Mike slowly and carefully puts the cover back, Bonnie just leaves. Why? The thing wants to kill you, my dude. That's not how predators work. And why is Mike so calm about nearly dying? There's no sense of actual danger. The movie builds up this entire FazFest festival, a town celebration despite the murder folklore, and I genuinely thought we were heading toward a climax where the animatronics attack the festival. That would be spectacular, terrifying, a legitimate set piece. Instead, nothing happens there. The festival is just set dressing. The climax happens at Mike's house with a handful of characters. The climax features the original Freddy's animatronics arriving to save the day from the toy animatronics in what the film clearly intends as a Avengers Assemble moment. The camera lingers on each one's heroic entrance, the music swells, and theaters across the country sat in awkward silence. Just kidding, mine, people were clapping and cheering. But imagine watching this at home. I mean, it's just terrible. Obviously, I had a fun time because people were and there were also people saying, like, shut up, and telling people, like, it's like to whisper, but like, I don't know, for a movie like this, I can't imagine actually sitting and paying attention. I was trying and I was nodding off. The story goes nowhere. There's no momentum. This ending where all the animatronics show up, and the movie's called Five Nights at Freddy's, and these characters finally appear. This encapsulates everything wrong with the film's approach. Marvel earned those crowd-pleasing character rivals through movies of development and investment. You can't just copy the technique and expect the same reaction. These animatronics showed up, dismantled the toys, and then their souls started fading away in what's supposed to be an emotional, but just feels rushed and earned, and I didn't care. And this film makes it painfully clear that Scott Cawthon, whatever his talents as a game designer and lore creator, cannot write feature film screenplays. The dialogue is expository and wooden. Characters explain things that should be shown. Plot points are telegraphed, so obviously it becomes insulting. According to reports, Matthew Lillard claimed the production carefully listened to fan feedback and incorporated it into the sequel, promising more action, more jump scares with an amped up story. What we got instead is a bloated mess that mistakes more stuff happening for better storytelling. And Blumhouse chief Jason Blum said that the script needed only 4 to 5 drafts compared to the film's first 14 drafts. That's not the flex he thinks it is. This needed more drafts from experienced screenwriters who understand 3-act structure, character development, and how to build tension. Of course, the studio probably, is forcing all of these different elements in, and it's hard to juggle that and, keep the movie's tone light and PG-13. I understand from a screenwriting perspective, they might have been trapped in a box. Like, you can only do these things, you can't make it too violent and dark, and you have to, like, if they're even dealing with trauma or Elizabeth Lale's past and William Afton, like, some screenwriter might have been like, let's make this really dark, but I'm sure they were like, no, let's keep it kid friendly, So I understand there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Emma Tammy hoped the film would be special and unexpected with lots of Easter eggs while remaining accessible to casual audiences who don't understand all the layers. She achieved neither. Hardcore fans are disappointed by the weak story and character work. Casual viewers are bewildered by the lore dumps and incomplete narratives. The film treats audiences like idiots who need everything explained in the most obvious ways possible. Every motivation is stated aloud multiple times, while simultaneously assuming we understand complex franchise mythology without proper context. It's condescending and confusing simultaneously. The film also suffers from trying to replicate the game's approach. Cryptic lore that fans piece together from the environmental clues and hidden details. That works in games where players actively engage with mysteries over time, theorizing and discovering. In a movie, you need actual storytelling, with characters we care about, and a narrative that progresses. You can have mystery and ambiguity, but you still need structure. Look at something like Scream, a horror film constantly referencing other horror films, packed with meta commentary and Easter eggs, but it still works as a straightforward slasher with a clear plot, escalating tension, and a satisfying resolution. You don't need to know every horror movie reference to enjoy Scream. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 assumes you either know everything or will just accept confusion. This is a textbook example of how not to make a horror sequel. It's boring when it should be scary, confusing when it should be clear, and incomplete when it should satisfy. The film will make money. It's already crossed $110 million worldwide against a $36 to $51 million budget. But financial success doesn't equal quality. This is poorly written, poorly structured, and wastes talented actors. Josh Hutcherson deserves so much better. Excellent practical effects and premise potential. The saddest part, the ingredients were all there. Competent animatronics, a creepy premise, decent actors, built-in fan base, and a production budget that could have delivered something special. This had all the ingredients, but they just did not cook. They threw everything in a pot, didn't season it, didn't follow the recipe, and served it up anyway because the brand name would sell regardless. For the inevitable third film to work, Blumhouse needs to do this. Bring in experienced screenwriters to help or replace Scott Cawthon entirely. They need to trust audiences can handle sophisticated storytelling. Tell a complete story rather than a 2-hour setup for the next one. Remember that horror movies need to be actually scary, not just reference things that fans will recognize, and structure the damn thing with a beginning, middle, and end. I'd say skip this movie unless you're a diehard franchise completist, or see it with a packed crowd that will make it entertaining through communal mockery. Otherwise, wait for streaming where you can at least pause to process the insanity with friends. The RPX upcharge was worth it for me purely for the theatrical absurdity factor and the crowd energy, but if you're going to see this in an empty theater on a weeknight, you're setting yourself up for 104 minutes of tedium punctuated by occasional unintentional comedy. This franchise deserves better. The fans deserve better, and most importantly, audiences who paid money to see a complete film deserve better than this incomplete, incoherent mess that treats them like walking wallets rather than people who came for entertainment.